All right, well, good morning. I'm Martin, this is Patti. We're here to talk about how HashiCorp implements site reliability engineering. We are from the core site reliability engineering team at HashiCorp. Patti's going to talk about later some of the other places we have SRE in the larger company and in our organization. But we are here to talk about how we plan and execute and do all of those things for the central SRE team. So again, I'm Martin Smith. I'm a staff site reliability engineer. I've been at HashiCorp involved with this team for about 3 years. Patti, Borne, senior manager for site reliability engineering. I've been involved with the team for 2 years. This is our pronouns and our social media. Keep the conversation going after this. We'd love to continue. With that, let's kick it off with a short story. So I think this story really illustrates how we do site reliability engineering as a central team. And I think it's a really good one. It's about our HCP platform. You've heard a lot about that today, I think already. But that's the HashiCorp Cloud Platform, and that's where we're offering things like HCP Consul or HCP Vault and some other things you're hearing about today, and you will tomorrow too. But this is about a billing function in a particular database that does metering. And so it just gets more and more rows over time. And so again, this is a great illustration of how SRE at HashiCorp works is SRE noticed, and I'll explain more in a minute how we noticed, but we noticed that this processor usage on this RDS instance was going up and up, 10%, 11% in March, 40% in April, and 60% in June. And while we love to get 100% utilization for all of our databases and other infrastructure, July looks like it could be a little rough based on this graph. But it was really good timing. And as I said, SRE noticed this because partly we were doing a quarterly reliability initiative. And we were embedding, and that's one of the main ways we engage with teams. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. But these were our top level goals for embedding. So one was taking some databases that looked really busy and splitting them out. One was making sure that teams knew about the performance of their databases, and this is the one that goes into this story, as well as making sure teams knew about when their databases had errors, right? Whether that's like a syntax error or maybe something with the libraries they're using, but we wanted to put that information in front of them and talk to them about how would you like to see this information. And then this last one is just improving some of our access patterns for RDS. But these were the kinds of things we're doing as a quarterly initiative, embedding in another team. And the second bullet is the one that we're talking about in this situation. And so we're improving some of our settings around RDS performance insights. Datadog just launched a product with some database APM capabilities. And the site reliability engineering team embedded with our billing folks were actually enabling those things and said, hey, we noticed this, right? So one more set of graphs here, not too many more, but this is the processor usage of this database, and then below it is the sequential scans of this database. And so this is also something that we were able to surface and when there are problems, get it in front of teams, use automation to do it so that, as site reliability engineers in a central team, we're trying to put information that teams can use in front of them and do it with automation as much as possible. So again, sequential scans at the bottom. Now, we're no strangers to optimizing databases, so we had indexes in place, right? But it turns out they weren't being used because of a quirk with the query optimizer in this database. And so it's still like to do these sequential scans. And again, something that maybe the team wouldn't have even noticed, but we certainly did, and the tooling we built did, and we got it in front of the team. And here's how it changed. So you can see here that this is sort of a dotted line graph where you see the previous month and then what happened. And I think this picture says it all, but we changed the index to a block range index. We added a unique index, which convinced the query planner to not do sequential scans anymore. And also just the CPU in this instance dropped off precipitously in general. The queries on it were 50% faster on average. We actually saved disk space, right? Which is, again, not the most important concern, but it's kind of great that not only did we fix things, but we got a bunch of side benefits too. And the truth is the billing team that owned this metering database could have done this work without us. But the tools we're building and the way we're engaging teams as a central SRE group is the reason this got addressed when it did. And we also made it so that it's easier for them to be aware of it, easier for them to make those changes quickly, and just generally easier to operate their services. And that's a theme for the core SRE group that we're talking about. So just one more slide from me, and then I'm going to hand it over to Patti for a little bit. But I just wanted to talk about what a central SRE team might do in general. And I really like this quote because it's essentially saying that no matter where we are in the process, we do a lot of advocacy and reminding teams that reliability is a product feature, and that's true at all of the phases of how we build and operate and do everything we do with our product offerings at HashiCorp. And so we have this culture of doing a lot of research at the front end into what customers might want, what is the market looking for. We do a lot of RFCs. I think that was mentioned before by Armin with an internal RFC example in the keynote. But we do a lot of those where SREs come in and they sort of say, have you thought about what the architecture you're building means for maintenance windows or other kinds of reliability? And then we also come in sort of late when stuff's being built or already running, like in this example, and we build tools and automation for teams to use to make it easier to make decisions, prioritize their work, all of those things, just advocating for reliability at every stage of that journey. And this quote really says it all. Every customer cares about this. You know, this isn't often the thing when you ask a customer, what features do you want in Consul, right? They might not mention this one first, but I guarantee you if it's down, they mention that that's a really big problem. So yeah, let me turn this over to Patti. Again, she's a senior engineering manager for the site reliability group. And she's going to talk more about skills, how we work, all kinds of things.
Thanks, Martin.
Beyond that.
Yeah. So being a site reliability engineer at HashiCorp requires a broad set of skills. The scope of work can vary significantly depending on what's going on. We include SREs in every phase of the development lifecycle, from ideation to operating a production system. The SREs we have at HashiCorp come to us with varying backgrounds. We have some that did front-end development. We have some database administrators, as Martin was talking about. We also have some just traditional software engineering. But the commonality they all have is a passion for reliability. Having that broad set of skills means doing all the things, right? And that's never a good idea. So as we went down the production engineering journey for the HashiCorp Cloud Platform, SRE's responsibilities grew a lot. And we needed to segment out those teams to enable them to be more productive. The first team we split off was an infrastructure team to focus on the HashiCorp stack and that underlying cloud infrastructure. The second team we split off was a developer productivity team to enable our software developers to ship code to production faster. Now let's get into a little bit of the SRE functions in some of those teams. We have the core SRE team, where Martin and I sit. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. But I'll start with developer productivity. As I mentioned, this type of work is meant to enable our software developers to ship their code to production faster. Now, while that may not seem like a traditional reliability task, it is, because our software developers need to be able to deploy and test their code in non-production environments. So this team's typically responsible for the deployment tools and the non-production environments. Then we have the infrastructure team. This is a little bit of a more traditional SRE function, so they provision and manage cloud resources, setting up some basic configurations and handing that off to the service teams. They interact the most with our cloud providers like AWS and Azure and GCP, and we consider them to be the experts in what our cloud providers' offerings are, so that they can make recommendations to those other teams on what's the best resource to use, depending on their use case. So, and they're on call for that foundational layer of the HashiCorp stack. Then at the top of that stack, you have the product teams, teams you're probably more familiar with, Terraform Cloud, HCP Vault, and several others. So these teams, while they build their service, they also operate it. So they are the closest to the code. They know what to do best when something goes wrong. So therefore, they're building it, they're operating it, and they're on call for it. Now, there's several teams between those infrastructure and the product teams, but I could talk forever about that, and let's not get into that. Well, let's go a little bit more into what the core SRE team does and how that is across all of the product lines. So the core SRE team works in a few different ways, and I'll talk about each of them. One of those is consulting with other engineering teams. So this is stuff like talking to them about improving the observability of their product or service, or maybe digging into some SLOs or troubleshooting a hard problem, just kind of giving that reliability lens that they may not have because they're so close to their code. Just second set of eyes sometimes is just a good idea. We also do process improvement work. So we own the incident management process. We train and enable the teams to run production incidents consistently and learn from those incidents and improve the reliability of their products. We also do reliability reviews of their services to kind of just dig in and look and see if we can find any reliability concerns, right? And then a couple other ways that we do it. We do embedding work with teams, but we do it differently. So traditional embedding work, you just go, an SRE is on a development team and they're just doing all the operational work. We've tried that, it didn't work out very great, so we've changed it up a little bit, and now we're doing project-based embedding, and it's similar, but the difference is the SRE will go work with a team on a very specific project that has a reliability goal, and there's a time box to it. So they actually enjoy this because they get to go become a part of that product team, really dig into their code and get to learn it a little bit and help them make it better. Then they come back out, and then they move on to another project, right? And so they get to cross a lot of the products and learn a lot of the things that way. And it makes them feel good to be able to help. We also create tools. So like I mentioned, we have different monitors and things that we'll kind of set up for them to just kind of plug and play and use. We manage the incident management tooling that I mentioned before, but we also have like catalogs and dashboards where we surface information so that the teams can make data-driven decisions about their product and service, just enabling them again to make reliability better. Now, that's some of the ways we do SRE, and Martin's going to get into a little bit about why we do SRE, like what it means to us. So.
Cool. Thanks, Patti. Let's see here. So, so I think it's really important when we talk about reliability, and I'm sure a lot of you might have SRE teams as well, or other kinds of DevOps teams and things. This temptation Patti mentioned for SRE to be involved in so many parts of the stack, so many parts of every project. I think it's important, and it's, I think, part of my role as a senior SRE working with this team to make sure we have a good definition of what reliability is. This helps us in a lot of conversations with our product folks about what to prioritize. It helps us in conversations about, should SRE spend time on a particular thing. It just helps us generally, as a rule of thumb, go back to this definition and say, all right, maybe a product needs some testing work, and we think, okay, does that fit into reliability and what SRE's goals are? And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but I think it's incumbent on me as a senior engineer in that team to really drive that definition, because it really feels like everything is included. So this is our sort of overall statement about what reliability means, is that we've got words like trustworthy, consistently performing well. So this also includes things around security, around a whole bunch of areas. I'm going to kind of break it down into some areas here for you. Resilience is one. So this is something I think I mentioned earlier. Sometimes we have a conversation with a team about, hey, we noticed when you had to do a database maintenance or you had to deploy a new version of your service that it took a long time, or it was difficult for customers to make requests during that time. And so we might talk to them about like even changing their architecture, even maybe approaching them and saying, we'd love to work with you in some of the ways Patti mentioned to modify that architecture, write proposals with a team to do that, that sort of thing. But this is definitely one of our core areas is resilience when we talk about reliability work. Another one that's a little more obvious, I think, for a lot of folks is scalability, right? This is the one that I think if you go back over sort of the industry and our professions over the last, 20 or 30 years, this is the one that is load testing, stress testing, how many customers can we get? And I think this one's also really important to have conversations with product about. So that is one thing we talk to product a lot about is scalability with our SRE team is, how many customers do you think you're gonna want at HashiConf when you launch this new feature or this new product? All right, let's help you, right? We've got some frameworks for stress testing and scale testing, things that I think you could probably even call a little bit of chaos engineering if you liked experiments that we run. And so this is a big one for us and our customers, but also requires a lot of really good product input, I think, to do well. So that's another component to reliability that we think about a lot. And then finally, observability, which I think doesn't always get as much attention, but actually we can't drive resilience or scalability without this one. So this is just talking to teams about like, can you understand what's happening with your service? Do you have the tools you need? I think I mentioned earlier at the beginning that putting data in front of teams is, I think, a big part of our responsibility as a site reliability engineering group, is getting that data in front of them, even if it's stuff that they already know or they see failed deploys every so often. It's things like the incident management process as well fit in here, because as Patti said, we are sort of the shepherds of that process, but also the data and reporting behind it, right? So observability could also be at the level of aggregating the number of a certain type of incidents and showing a team like this is doubled or your number of repeat incidents is doubled, all the way down to things like your logs are not indicating that there's a problem, or your logs are info level when they should be error level, so that it's easier for us to help you diagnose a problem. So that's another big focus area of ours. In addition to those, I think those are kind of really easy to talk about and list off and help make decisions with. But we also have some core values that we use in our SRE team, our central SRE team, that also help us understand and really like talk to the rest of the company about reliability and how important it is, right? So these are the things that when we make a comment on a design and say, gosh, what would a good first SLO for this be? And someone might say, well, we're not really thinking about that yet. These core values are where it comes in that we can say, oh, actually, no, that's what we think about at the beginning. Those are our values as a company, is operating this system and starting with an SLO at the beginning, even maybe before we've designed a solution to the problem or the thing we're trying to fix or solve or build. So these definitions also keep our team aligned in conversations, as well as Patti and I. So this is the first really big one. This is the hardest. Reliability is a customer-facing product feature, but it's also in some ways one of the easiest for us to collect data about. This is something you can just talk to customers and say, is this important to you? If you're evaluating a beta, are you evaluating it because you want to see Consul's latest feature? Are you evaluating it because you want to make sure that it's available enough for your workload? And it's also a great example of something where we have this conversation a lot around product architecture decisions, because that overall customer experience can often be really affected by a big architectural decision, like the maintenance example I mentioned before. We also have this a core value, which is that SRE is a software engineering discipline. We want our SREs to be able to write code to solve problems. I think sometimes in the industry this isn't always true, but for us it's really important. It also helps us sort of say that if you're running into toil, right, we want at least 50% of your time as a site reliability engineer to be writing code. And I think also this allows them, as Patti mentioned with embedding, when they join a team and learn a lot about the HashiCorp Cloud Platform or HCP Vault or something, this is the thing, these are the tools that, right, that they need to be able to actually make modifications to a product, whether it's to add logging or make an architectural change or even the database example we mentioned before. It really just gives us the best tools. And then I think this is one more, that's the last sort of big core value I would highlight, which is, and Patti mentioned this too earlier, but developers on call for their code, right? We think people build better systems if they're closer to them, right? The engineering teams building these products are the ones having conversations, for example, with product managers. And so if they're operating their service and they notice that there's something that makes it more difficult to operate, they're going to ask product managers about it. They're going to kind of close that loop back to the roadmap. And again, SRE is here to advise, to embed, to advocate, but ultimately, long term, we still want these product teams to own their code. And this last core value really also helps us align when trying to decide what to do, especially when we're planning work, which Patti's going to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so people often ask, how do you plan work for an SRE team? You know, isn't it just reactive? No, it's not. We review a lot of information. We have data from incidents and SLOs, looking for trends like single points of failure or potential performance bottlenecks. And we keep a maturity list of things like, does a product have request tracing enabled? Are they using our incident management process? And we gather all of our information and our data and we bring it together and we go to our stakeholders and we say what we think is important and why. And we have that conversation, and we then decide like we're going to go work on this. And we use one of the engagement models that I mentioned, maybe consulting with that team or improving a process or doing a project with them to fix some issues or creating new tools. Like all of that stuff comes out of this information. And then measuring the success for an SRE team, it's kind of hard because the work we do, directly impacts another team, right? Like we're helping them improve the reliability of their products. But we use a lot of continuous improvement metrics, things like SLO coverage, performance improvements after we've worked on something. We look at incident metrics, specifically like repeat incidents. Are we seeing less of them after we've fixed a problem? Overall, we're looking at what impact can we have on the organization and are we improving the reliability of those products? And then, for us, for most software teams, their roadmaps might be a little bit different, but for SRE, the roadmap has got a pretty clear North Star. It's reliability. Planned or not, reliability is a core part of the customer experience. And SRE is the last team in the room advocating for that customer experience, driving reliability first. So at HashiCorp, SRE is not driven by one person alone. It takes all of us in all of the different functions that I mentioned. And we leverage our structure of manager and tech lead to really just kind of push for reliability in all of our products at HashiCorp so that we can make everything better. I think that's it for us. So thank you for coming. And we'd love to talk to you about how you do SRE. So catch us in the hallway or at the HashiCorp Zone.